Welcome to the Mucked Up My Self-Care podcast.
I'm Jill from New York.
And I'm Linda from Tasmania.
We are two moms from opposite sides of the world who are living, demonstrating, and helping moms across the world build their self-care asset bank.
Ready to dive in? Messy, interrupted, imperfect, and most of all mucked up. Let's get going. Good morning.
Hello.
Good evening. Hello.
Yay.
You might notice my sound is slightly different. I'm at the library today. Yes, it's been a week. So
yeah.
It's good to record today.
Same.
Even without my comfy mic.
The one that the kids always tear apart, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know what it is about the mic cover that the kids love so much, but
so much. It's fun, good fun. Anyway, let's go.
Highs and
lows.
Start us off, Linda.
Okay. High, I think, would be finally getting out for a bit of space right now at the library. Essentially, I've done a lot of work at home this week with children under tow, and it's taken a little bit of a toll on my mental health and patience and tolerance and window and lots of other things. So I needed to be able to take a minute, and very grateful to be able to do that today. So that's probably a high and a low in one, really. Like the low would be a big week of working at home with children. And the high would be getting out to the library, I think, as well. Yep. What about for you? I've seen you in the library this week, I think, as well, haven't I?
This week? No, last week I was in the library a few times. It is my go-to for for my away days when I need a break. But let's see, my high was, it's still coming off of, not still, we didn't talk about this yet. As we're recording this, it's just a few days after my first book launch party. So that was super fun and such a great high for the week. So that I feel like that we were able to have such a nice celebration for Your Purpose is Calling book from the New Author Intensive that our friend Holly taught and put together. So very exciting to be now a published author and to sit and celebrate that with some really close friends. So that was my high for the week. And my low has been trying to navigate the emotions coming off of that high with all the melty of that, and some unfortunate health news for my dad, and trying to just not be too worrisome on it and just kind of wait until we have all the answers and diagnoses and whatever else needs to come out of that. So kind of a wishy-washy week between the highs and the lows. So it's nice to be recording and kind of be in the space of a little bit of self-care and having it just a conversation that's not heavy pressure stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And I think both of us can use this opportunity sometimes to process a little bit of stuff out loud, rather than it running around in your head. And even in our own self-care journeys, we've been unraveling this new or improved or sometimes confronting version of ourselves as well.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of emotions with all of that going on and trying to navigate like what comes next when we're that fresh off of something big and exciting that's just come about.
Yeah, exactly. And I looked up the definition of unravel, and it's actually to undo something like that's twisted or wove. It actually says woven threads, which is something that a term that I use a lot. Or investigate and solve or explain. So something complicated or puzzling. So I think that's really good to think about that definition, because we are puzzling as humans. We've got layers of stuff that we often need to work through. We realize that, well, actually, I do matter sometimes, or I need to speak up for my needs, or I need to. There's so many things that we've discovered along this self-care journey for us, and perhaps you've discovered for yourself as listener too. And I think it's quite an unravelling and doesn't necessarily have an end point. Do you think it's fair to say that it just continues?
I think so. I mean, we're ever growing. So with that growth will come some pain points. And I think that's really what the unraveling ends up being, is like, as we continue to grow and find where the shifts are, pain points will come up for around those shifts. So what do we have to then solve, I guess we can say, by unraveling? Well, how did that pain point come about now? Like, because of my shift, because of the growth, what's changed to even get things twisted up into a knot? So that way we, because let's put it this way. There's been some shifts in, to give an example, there's a shift of something that was scheduled at an inconvenient time for me to be able to participate. And then there's been a shift in that timing to a different date, a different time slot. And this week, with some things that have happened for other people, I was asked to fill in and participate in this time block, which I was able to do because it was in a different position, which actually now has opened up the conversation of, if it stays like this, do I want to continue? Is it possible? So there's still a little bit of a pain point now with that, because I have to find, I have to figure out different childcare situation, because it does still run into like Declan being picked up from school, but it's the opposite of what the original pain point was for the first time slot, was figuring out childcare for him in the morning, which was it was so much pressure for both him and I, in such a different way, that him staying later and me picking him up later is a different feeling for him. It's not a rushed in the morning. He's not getting his time cut off with me. Instead, it's like, okay, I get a little bit extra time of playtime. I don't have to stop my play at school to go home. So it was a totally different atmosphere. Same kind of like pain point, 2 different times of the day, but because things shifted and it grew in a different way for both him and I, like there's this almost more flexibility now to figure out, can we actually go ahead and keep doing this? Like, is this a good shift for us? So it'll be fun to explore that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And maybe something that you weren't necessarily thinking about back then either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we unravel, we start to realize other options or other ways that we can be, because as humans, we put up different coping mechanisms to be able to get through the day. At a previous time, it would have been that I had to get back to set up my work day early in the morning. And that was a way that you could cope and schedule and fit it all in. Even though it created a pain point, it was something you tried to adapt to. Mm-hmm. But I think part of the unraveling is realizing that we can't keep pretending that this is working. Maybe we're in a spot where we've discovered that we do actually need some more self-care time, and we can't keep pretending to ourselves that it doesn't matter, that we can't keep pretending to ourselves that we don't matter as a result, because that's essentially what we're saying in a way. If we keep putting off self-care or keep putting off this or keep putting off that thing, it's not really honouring what we say we want or we think we want, or even finding out that it's not what we want because we don't take a step forward in that direction. So I think part of, well, if we're talking about unravelling, part of that is starting to essentially strip back some of those coping mechanisms or projections that we've put in place, to sometimes to guard ourselves, sometimes to be able to fit to a schedule, sometimes to be able to work, sometimes to be able to cater for the fact we've just had a baby. There's different reasons why we have to do it. It's not necessarily always a bad thing that we put these protections in place. However, there's a certain point, I think, where we've either grown and we don't fit the recent or previous version anymore, and maybe Declan doesn't either. So we don't fit it anymore, and therefore it has to either grow, be undone, be investigated and changed. And for me, that's important for self-growth and self-care and unravelling. Yeah. Do you have any other examples?
Oh, do I have any other examples? I think that's my only example that I can think of.
What about something where you might have put up some protection or some circumstances that had a lot of compromise or didn't necessarily? So for me, it would be working from home this week was a compromise in a way, because I knew that it was only a 3-day week for the kids at school. It wasn't necessarily anything I can control about that, but it definitely was something that was out of the ordinary, or meant that my self-care was sacrificed and therefore needs more attention today. So I think there's lots of different ways that we have to compromise in order to put up those ways to essentially cope. It's just, I think, being able to have the perspective to stand back and go, well, actually, no, this isn't working. Actually, you know what, this could be done better. When you're in the thick of it, that can be really hard to do.
Yeah.
As well.
It comes down to being honest with ourselves also, in recognizing that something isn't working, and not just, or maybe even just admitting that we're in a season that doesn't work for us. Like you were saying, like, is that part of the growth that we have, where we have to figure out where that shift needs to be made, but actually giving ourselves permission to compromise, or to go ahead and say no to something, so that way, or yes to something that we might be hesitant to do because we're not being fully honest with ourselves. So I'd say one of the sticking points for me right now is, like, you have been so diligent with your working out, which has been inspiring to me, but I haven't been able to do it because I've been so focused on getting my nutrition down, we'll call it, which has been a big focus that I have not been able to wrap my mind around the changes in the timing that I was trying to set up. So I have to figure out like I'm trying to actually unravel it. Like, what is the pain point in figuring out how fitness will work into my schedule now? Is it because it's not the same time every single day? Is it because I'm trying to put a change in where I really just need to stick with one thing? Or like, am I trying to do too many different things at one time? So there's definitely that, having to feel like I need to unpack what is it that I'm stuck at.
Yeah, and there's lots of questions I think that need to be asked as well. Like you said, is it because it's trying to fit to a calendar that doesn't quite allow for that yet? Is it because you need accountability? Is it because you need to do it with someone? Is it because you need, like, there's so many questions that you could ask in that, and it's hard to have the patience because you just want to get to that point of having it consistent. So asking all the questions, I think, can be that confronting part of it. It can be, well, actually, I wish I was motivated, but I'm not.
Yeah. Or knowing, well, I should be able to do it all, and that should doesn't need to be there because we don't need to do it all.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
does come in stages. Like, we can't expect ourselves to put on all, like, to start doing all of the pieces at the same time. So it's taking them in small bite-sized pieces, one little bit at a time, until we've gotten consistent before adding in the next thing. So
Yeah. And I think if we're looking at the unraveling process, quite often we are unraveling a pain point. And if we looked at all of those things individually as a crisis or pain point or whatever it feels like for us, if we look at them all individually, it can mean that each of those feels much larger than it needs to be. And while you still need to focus on individual ones, I think without having the perspective that this is just a temporary thing or a temporary moment, it can be really hard to then unravel further without getting caught up in that one thing. How do you think for you, you've been able to move forward in part of that unraveling? Because that's part of the process too. It's not just working out how to fix it.
yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of a grieving process on my end in recognizing that it's going to take a little bit longer than I wanted to, because I want to do this the right way. And I wouldn't say I would not say that I am a instant gratification person, but I think we all, as humans, we do have that little bit of wanting things now, to work out right now and not have to wait for it to become a habit or whatever it ends up being. So there's always that little bit of a sadness when it's like, this is going to take a lot longer for me to be consistent and good at this. I think realizing that I'm not Superwoman and it comes perfectly instantly. So that I think is probably the struggle of being okay with moving forward after unraveling, is being okay with the realness of it's going to take a while for the solution to really be in its place. But once it is, the momentum just picks right up. So knowing that gives you the hope that it's the right move to make.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said hope as well. I think that's a big part of what we need to remember when working on some of the unraveling, is that desire is another word for it, probably, like the desire to do things better or improve or take time for ourselves in self-care, and the hope for change or hope for improvement or hope for sometimes being able to cry comfortably, maybe,
Yeah.
is important to remember as well.
Where do you find hope in the process of unraveling and where you go forward with that?
I think sometimes it can come back to it could come back to remembering part of the reasons why I'm creating this sort of life. We recently just talked about living out our dream life and the visions that we have and those sort of things. And for me, it's important that I hold on to some of that hope and anticipation, because it's dangerous to get into a suffering mode, if you like, if we are looking at all of those unraveling moments as little mini crisis or little mini pain points. It can be really dangerous to ignore the feelings of those, is probably what I'm trying to say. So I think one of the biggest ways that I hold on to that hope is remembering that these things are temporary. That unraveling is a process and it takes time and patience, but the feelings of those pain points are temporary.
And it's all leading you to get what you want, right?
Yes. Yeah.
To
Well,
live
also
a dream
not.
life and to
Yeah.
have things.
Well, also I think for me, part of that big unraveling is also just getting used to pretending that it's not just all okay. Like admitting that sometimes that there's a pain point has been an important part of that growth too. Because sometimes we don't want to admit to ourselves that, hey, we stuffed up, or there's a problem here, or there's a child who maybe isn't quite okay right now and needs a lot more than I can give solely and wholly on my own.
There's a song that I've been listening to a lot recently, and it's the title is "It's Okay to Not Be Okay." I was like, yep, it's okay that we're not okay because it's temporary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. Yep.
But that's why we practice self-care, because it helps us be okay. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
um,
Yep. So, Jill, for someone who is looking to do some of that unraveling themselves and need some guidance in that or some support, we actually would love you to reach out to our email.
yeah.
We read all the emails ourselves and respond, and would love to start up that conversation. If you want to
Yes.
drop us a line, mention this episode, we'll be there ready and waiting.
Yes, because
Yeah.
we've even I think it was one of the last 2 episodes or so we were talking about it, but like trying to step back a little bit and put ourselves back in our own shoes when we were figuring out self-care, and think of the things that we would have probably needed then more than what we had available to us as a self-care thing to do, or a way to start, or jumping off point, whatever it may be. And
Yep.
I love that you were in the library today, because that's one of my things too, is I really enjoy going to the library, change things up, either for work, to go work for the day, or even right after school. Our library is right across the street from Declan's school, so it's easy enough to just walk right over for us. But we spend like an hour after school on our easy days just hanging out in the library, and it's such a great escape from things that I really do enjoy that so much. So that would be, I think, one of our self-care tips for this episode, is to check out the library, either for yourself for the day or with your children, your child.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting experience sometimes as well to just be around people. And remembering my own self-care and boundaries, and make sure I don't just talk to everybody and anybody.
Yeah.
Which can happen as well. So that's part of my own unraveling exercise today. So until next week.
We hope you can unstuck your mouth.
Bye for now.